Hey y'all, this is Brown at I have Brown, and tonight we're going to be talking about Wolverine by Chris Claremont and Frank Miller. So this volume contains the four-issue miniseries from 1982 that was written by Chris Claremont and illustrated by Frank Miller with inks by Josef Rubinstein, and it also contains issues 172 and 173 of Uncanny X-Men with pencils by Paul Smith and inks by Bob Wiacek. So for those who are fans of Wolverine, this is definitely an essential collection, because you have Wolverine in his first mini-series, that focuses entirely on him, and the X-Men are basically, barely background characters. But of course, with the inclusion of issues 172 and 173, the X-Men come back into, focus, and Wolverine is, brought back into the fold, and we see how he's grown as a character, both as an individual and as a team player. And this was done at a point in time where Chris Claremont was, the regular writer, for Uncanny X-Men in what was an epic run, that spanned several years. And it also coincided with the time wherein Frank Miller was the regular artist and writer on the series Daredevil. And so for those who were familiar with Daredevil, when Frank Miller was working on it, the art style is very similar, because when he was oftentimes paired with, the inker Klaus Janson, his art style meshes rather well with Josef Rubinstein on the inks. And the type of cinematic grace that Frank Miller demonstrated in Daredevil is, in the clarity of visuals, is very much on hand in the artwork that he does for the Wolverine miniseries. And so it's definitely a highlight for both Chris Claremont as a writer, for developing the character of Wolverine as someone that he saw as a failed samurai, and being put in a position where he was destroyed and then reborn. And of course, I mean, it's also a highlight for Frank Miller, for basically playing a part in visualizing a vital story in Wolverine's saga. And the story takes place in Japan. And one of the interesting things is that, Frank Miller would work with Japanese culture when it comes to, say, artwork and what have you, or story elements, and some of these elements, would show up in his work on Daredevil, but also in the 1980s miniseries for DC Comics, Ronin. And there we had a cyberpunk story involving a samurai being reincarnated, a samurai from the past being reincarnated into the future. And it's a very fascinating story. But the idea of, say, a samurai who had failed in his duty, trying to find purpose again, was a plot element in Ronin. And you can't help but wonder, how much of that was inspired by Frank Miller's time working on this story. So even though Chris Claremont was the one who wrote the story, you can definitely see where Frank Miller got a lot of his ideas from in terms of, say, like Japanese culture and story elements, in some of his other work. But let's go ahead and get into it. So the story starts off in Canada, wherein Wolverine is hunting down a rogue grizzly bear because said rogue grizzly bear had been shot with an illegally poisoned arrow by a hunter, and this hunter had decided to let the poisoned arrow do the job for him, and didn't bother following the bear and confirming the kill. And as a result, this grizzly bear ends up going on a rampage and killing a whole bunch of people in the Canadian wilderness. And so Wolverine took it upon himself to, hunt this bear down and put it out of its misery. And it's, something that he doesn't want to do, because he knows that this bear isn't responsible for its actions at this point. But at the same time, it is a rogue grizzly bear. If someone doesn't put it down, then who knows how much more damage it'll do and how many more people it'll kill. So he tries his best to, do it quickly, but it's brutal but quick. But then he hunts down, he's able to use, his sense of smell to, pick up a trail of the hunter that shot the bear with the poisoned arrow in the first place. And he beats the guy up and then leaves him for the Canadian authorities, since this guy was basically, responsible for this bear going rogue in the first place. I mean, he's definitely got some manslaughter charges for sure. And so after that, Wolverine goes to Japan because his love interest, Mariko Yashida, who had been introduced in the Uncanny X-Men series, his love interest has, as of late, has suddenly stopped talking to him. And anytime, he tries to, call, anyone that, works for her family, he's basically given the runaround. So he's like, something's not right here. And so he goes to Japan and it makes contact with a friend of his and the local authorities, who informs him that Mariko is now married. And Wolverine's like, what? And this friend of his explains that Mariko's father, Shingen, who had long been absent from the family, has come back into a picture and reclaimed his place as head of the Yashida crime family. Because unfortunately, Mariko's family, part of its power does come to the fact that it was tied to crime. But in order for Shingen to secure his power, he has to offer his hand. He has to offer the hand of his daughter Mariko to a member of another crime family, in order for this power to be secured and for there to be peace between these crime families. And so Mariko basically had because of her family's customs and traditions, as well as Japanese culture, she had to abandon the man she loved and marry a man that she does not, so that her father can stay in power. And so, having done so, I mean, that's why basically Wolverine's been given the runaround this whole time. And so Wolverine's like, I gotta hear it from her, herself. And so he goes to the Yashida, family home and finds her. But he also finds out that her, new husband likes to beat her. And so, he nearly kills the guy once the guy, stumbles upon them. But before he can do so, Mariko begs him not to, and basically, says, if you loved me, if our love meant anything, please don't kill this man, and please leave here and forget about me. Remember me, but forget about me, because our, love can go no further. And so, more or less. And so Wolverine, reluctantly, backs down and leaves, because he knows at this point this is the only thing he can do for the woman he loves, because of culture and all that. But as he goes outside, he's hit by multiple poison shuriken, and it's enough to knock him out. And once he wakes up, hours later, he realizes that the amount of poison that they hit him with these shurikens would have killed a normal person, but for him, because of his healing factor, it just, basically rendered him unconscious and, put him through a lot of physical agony. And so as he's waking up, he's trying to, come to his senses and everything, and he finds himself face to face with Shingen Yashida, the head of the Yashida crime family, and Mariko's father. And the two of them talk, and Shingen, while he compliments Wolverine on his flawless Japanese, he insults him and judges him because of the fact that he's a gaijin who undervalues the idea of family honor as far as Japanese culture goes. And Wolverine, basically says, well, hey, dude, you're the one who's pimping out your daughter here, to an animal who beats her, so, why would I have any respect for you, or your family? And so, the two of them, they come at this impasse where, they basically just keep insulting each other. And so finally Shingen says, okay, I'll make you a deal. Basically, you beat me in this, let's see how worthy you are. You beat me, you and Mariko, get to walk out of here. Or you get to walk out of here with Mariko. But if I beat you, basically you're out of the picture and or possibly dead. And so Shingen, tosses Wolverine a wooden sword and takes one for himself. And Wolverine's kind of like, why don't we use the real thing? And Shingen says, because frankly, you're not worthy. And so the two of them fight each other in a seemingly friendly contest, except Shingen cheats and deliberately hits Wolverine at multiple nerve clusters that basically make the pain that he's already in from the poison even worse. And it makes him, which in turn makes Wolverine angry. And the angrier he gets, the more, he feels inclined to pop his claws. And sure enough, he does so, which in turn plays right into Shingen's hands, because one of the people watching this fight is his daughter and Wolverine's lover, Mariko. And when she sees this, as far as she knew, the two of them were, just having a quote-unquote friendly contest, using wooden swords. But because Wolverine popped his claws, he's turned this into a real fight. And so now blood has to flow. And basically Wolverine realizes that by having popped his claws, he couldn't have dishonored himself even more in front of Mariko if he had tried. And so while he does get, a couple of cuts in on Shingen, even though he's an old man, is exceptionally skilled in combat, in martial arts and sword fighting, and is able to basically wipe the floor with Wolverine by, hitting him at, those aforementioned nerve clusters and basically able to, defeat him. And as Wolverine loses consciousness, one of the last things he hears is, Shingen asking Mariko if she still thinks Wolverine is worthy of her, and she sadly says no. And so Wolverine basically passes out, wishing he were dead. And as he comes to, he finds himself on the streets of Japan and ends up in the company of a lone wolf, type woman named Yukio, who you could almost call her a Ronin, like a lone samurai almost, except, she's a woman. And basically she delights in chaos. She loves to get, her adrenaline rushes from, hopeless combat, or dangerous combat with hopeless odds. And she actually becomes something of a lover, for Wolverine, because he's at a point where, as far as he's concerned, he's forever ruined his chances of, being with the woman he loves because of how he dishonored himself, in her eyes, in his fight with Shingen. And so, the two of them, they basically, go, on several, pub crawls across Japan, getting into bar fights and what have you. But they also find themselves being attacked by members of this ninja group called the Hand. And this is a ninja group that, shows up in Daredevil as well. But, they, work for several, Japanese crime families, those in power. And basically they're assassins. And one of the interesting things about them is if you kill one of them, they'll dissolve. Like they're ordinary people and everything, but because of their costumes and there's like a chemical that's put into their costume, I believe, that once one of them gets killed, they end up dissolving, and so one way to dispose of evidence, I guess. But Wolverine and Yukio find themselves being attacked by members of the Hand, and then there's a complex plot wherein Yukio is needing Wolverine's help to kill the head of a rival crime family, and which has been hunting her down and making her life hell. But as it happens, though, this is an individual that Shingen himself is wanting to have killed, but he's also willing to use his daughter and her abusive husband as bait. And so the parties meet at this kabuki play, and as they're watching the play, Wolverine and Yukio, who are basically watching from the shadows, Wolverine comes to realize that the kabuki troupe is made up of assassins who are, about to, try and kill Mariko and her, abusive husband. And so, Wolverine, he takes to the stage and is able to, save Mariko, but in the process, though, shows her, just how savage he is in combat, and because of how he's basically, sliced, the assassins up and everything. And in the meantime, Yukio takes care of the members from the rival crime family who had set the whole thing up, because, for them, they were trying to, kill Mariko and her husband so Shingen would be weakened. But Mariko basically blows up their car, and in the process, for a time, basically cements her, bond with Wolverine, or solidifies her bond with Wolverine, and the two of them become these sort of, chaotic lovers. But then, Wolverine learns that Yukio was in fact working for Shingen this whole time, because Shingen had wanted to use Wolverine to take care of the members from the head of that opposing crime family, but at the same time he was wanting Yukio to have killed Wolverine afterwards, but because the fact that she actually fell in love with him, she can't bring herself to do it. But unfortunately, though, Wolverine finds out, the hard way that Yukio was in fact a member of Shingen's crime family. Excuse me. And unfortunately, she had also accidentally killed his friend, the one who informed him on what was going on with Mariko. And so Wolverine chases her down, and she's crying and laughing at the same time, because she loves the thrill of the hunt and everything and being chased by Wolverine, but at the same time she's really come to love him, and she's devastated at the fact that she's basically destroyed their bond, and it's all her fault. And so the two of them end up at this sand garden, and Wolverine's about to kill her, even though Yukio is saying, you can't kill me, you and I are the same, and we both thrive on chaos, and the uncertainty of life. And basically, Wolverine's like, yeah, you're probably right, but this is what we both deserve. And so he's about to kill her when they get ambushed once more by members of the Hand. And so, they both fight separately and are able to, kill their would-be assassins. But in the process, Yukio gets away and Wolverine is left by himself. But as he's contemplating events, he realizes that, throughout this whole time, he's proven, that he's not the animal that, Shingen and consequently Mariko think he is. I mean, he's proven that, he can, basically rise above his savage instincts and fight as a man and not as an animal. And so from there, he takes it upon himself to declare a one-man war on Shingen's empire. And it gets to such a point that he causes so much damage that, those who, work with Shingen are basically losing confidence in him. And Wolverine makes it very clear that he's coming for Shingen. And so one night, Shingen basically, allows for Wolverine to come to the family, compound, even though there are, multiple guards and assassins, stationed everywhere. Wolverine's able to make his way through most of them by himself. But it turns out Yukio, comes onto the scene as well and, kills a few of the others, some of them that Wolverine didn't even know about, because she's trying to redeem herself in Wolverine's eyes. And Shingen ends up getting a hold of her and, nearly kills her, because, basically she failed in her assignment to kill Wolverine, but she was hoping to kill Shingen to redeem herself in Wolverine's eyes. But he stopped from killing her by his own daughter, by Mariko, because she's starting to see just, how corrupt her father is, and basically how he sold the family, honor, for power, as, the leader of a crime family. And so Wolverine eventually, comes upon Shingen himself and, chases him down, and the two of them engage in this, sword fight, wherein this time they use real swords, honor swords, swords that have been in the family for generations, the Yashida family for generations. And Wolverine's asking him, am I worthy now? And, Shingen says, that Gaijin remains to be seen. And so the two of them fight with real swords this time. And once again, Shingen, even though he's a much older man, is able to, do quite a bit of damage to Wolverine. Because one of the other things that happened was, prior to the fight, he had been shot by Mariko's abusive husband. And because he had put him in a position where basically if Wolverine didn't, surrender, he'd, kill Mariko, his own wife, but also, of course, Wolverine's lover, or the woman that Wolverine loves. And so Wolverine had surrendered, and then he'd been shot by, her abusive husband. But then he, in turn, was killed by Yukio. And so Wolverine saw all this, and, he realizes that Yukio just saved his life. But at the same time, he can't forget the fact that she was a part of the plan all along and killed one of his friends. But at the same time, he can't bring himself to kill her because he not only saved his life, she not only saved his life, but she also saved Mariko's life as well. So even though she hates Mariko for being the one that Wolverine loves, she also realizes that, Mariko, is an innocent in all this. And, because Wolverine loves her, that's the only way that she could maybe, restore herself in Wolverine's eyes. And so Wolverine, basically just lets her go because that's all he can do. He feels he doesn't have the right to hunt her down and kill her, but he also, can't bring her to justice either, so he just lets her go. And so even though he's weakened, that's when he goes after Shingen, and then the two of them have their sword fight. So, at this point, Wolverine's gone through an army of, hand mercenaries, and he's been shot, in order to, fight Shingen. And Shingen is able to do quite a bit of damage to Wolverine, with, his sword play and his skills. But eventually, though, he slips up and he tries to, go for a beheading blow. But because of Wolverine's adamantium-covered skeleton, the sword, kind of just gets stuck there, and Wolverine just sort of has this evil smile, this grim evil smile, or evil looking smile on his face, and he brings his fist up to Shingen's throat, and Shingen has this oh crap look on his face. And then next thing you see is a close-up on Wolverine's eyes, which have gone almost blood red, and you see that snicked sound effect, the sound effect of Wolverine's claws popping. So basically, he's just put his hand right here, or his fist right here, and popped his claws right in Shingen's throat. And so even though you don't see the act being done itself, you get the idea, and it's like, oh damn. So Wolverine basically did the equivalent of a rope-a-dope, like Ali against was it the rope-a-dope trick that Muhammad Ali tried, that did against it was either George Foreman or Frazier, one of the two. And except of course in this fight they're using samurai swords, and so Wolverine took multiple hits to get Shingen into a position where he could strike the final blow. And so after that, Mariko comes onto the scene, and she takes the sword that Wolverine had initially been using against Shingen before he popped his claws on him. And actually, it's the sword that Shingen was using on Wolverine. And she takes his sword, and she explains the family lineage with the sword, and how it's always symbolized the family honor. But in family honor dictates that she used the sword to kill Wolverine, since he murdered her father. But since Shingen, her father, had forsaken the family honor by leading the family into the realm of crime, he's forsaken the honor that he had. And so she gives the honor sword to Wolverine, saying that he had earned it. And so the two of them, now that they're free of Shingen's power and influence, they decide to go through with the wedding. And that's how the miniseries ends. And then we go into issues 172 and 173 of Uncanny X-Men, wherein the X-Men are invited to the wedding of Logan and Mariko, and things seem to be going well until the two of them are attacked by the mercenary Viper and her consort Silver Samurai. And Silver Samurai, it turns out, is Mariko's brother. And basically he's more than a little pissed off that Shingen had named her the heir of the Yashida family instead of him. And so but the thing is, he himself was a criminal as well. And so the fact that it's in Mariko's hands is something that really pisses him off, because he was thinking that because of his place as a criminal in the underworld, surely he'd be more fit for power and to lead the crime family. But Mariko has the power and is wanting to basically redeem the family name. And so Silver Samurai and Viper attack the X-Men by way of poisoning, and all the X-Men except for Storm, Rogue, and Wolverine are basically rendered ineffective for the time being. And what ends up happening is Wolverine and Rogue end up working together. And at this point in time, Wolverine and Rogue had a bit of a bad history with one another, because Rogue had drained the abilities and memories of the woman Carol Danvers, who was Miss Marvel, and at this point in time had uh, become the alien superheroine binary, because of events in the X-Men series, wherein she and the X-Men were caught in this war against the Brood, um, and she was permanently changed, but she was already permanently changed when Rogue took her powers and her memories. And Carol Danvers had been a friend of Wolverine's, and so whenever Rogue comes up, basically there's bad blood, right? But at this point in time, she had been accepted into the X-Men, and Professor Xavier had agreed to try and help her because she was basically going crazy because she couldn't tell where her memories ended and Carol Danvers began. And so basically this was Xavier trying to give her another chance, and the rest of the X-Men were reluctantly doing so because Professor X was the leader, and they're all for second chances, but this was also a woman that they'd gone up against and fought before, and so they're hesitant to trust her. But since they're all out of commission at this point, Wolverine with his healing factor and Rogue with her enhanced abilities were the only ones that were not as adversely affected by the poison as everyone else was. And so the two of them end up going after the Silver Samurai and Viper, and in the meantime Storm ends up coming across Yukio, and the two of them end up becoming friends. And Yukio's chaotic joy, or I should say Yukio's joy at the pure chaos that her life has to offer kind of rubs off on Storm, and Storm basically ends up embracing her wild side. And so eventually, though, Viper and Silver Samurai, they attempt to assassinate Mariko herself, but Wolverine and Silver Samurai had more or less fought to a standstill, although Wolverine had the advantage and had badly injured Silver Samurai. But Viper takes Mariko hostage and threatens to kill her if Wolverine doesn't let Silver Samurai go. And so he has no other choice, and he does so. And as Silver Samurai goes to Viper, Viper takes her gun and turns it on Mariko and Wolverine, and Wolverine gets Mariko out of the way, but as weakened as he is, he's not going to be able to take the hit. He's not going to be able to dodge the shot, and this is from like a fully powered energy pistol, and he's already hurt pretty badly. And so as he's fully preparing himself to take the hit for Mariko, Rogue charges in and takes the shot herself, and basically ends up nearly getting killed, because the energy pistol that Viper's using ends up overcharging and blowing up, right? But it basically used up all its energy in shooting Rogue, and Rogue nearly has a hole in her chest, a hole of energy that's just nearly ripped through her, and she's dying, and but she's glad that she died saving the lives of Mariko and Wolverine, because she remembers that Mariko was kind to her when the other X-Men when everyone else in the group, like the X-Men, were distrustful of her, and understandably so. But Mariko, was kind to her, the whole time, and so she's, glad that she at least, died saving a good person. But Wolverine comes in and saves her life, by way of kissing her and allowing her to absorb his healing factor. And Rogue's begging him, not to do it because she's afraid that if he touches her, in any way, she'll permanently absorb his, life force, which is what ends up happening usually. Not, like if you touch her or she touches you, she absorbs, like your energy and what have you, and she doesn't know how much she's going to take from Wolverine. But Wolverine feels like that, the fact that that she saved his life and Mariko's, basically, proves that, she's, worth, the risk. Like, she proved herself, her loyalty. And so, he gives her a kiss and allows her to, take his energy and his healing factor so she in turn can heal. And it's shortly after that the wedding, once, everyone's recovered and everything, the wedding commences. And this is like a couple of days later, right? And and Wolverine and Mariko are walking down the aisle, and all the X-Men are there, and some of the family members of the X-Men are there, and it's a happy moment. But then Mariko stops the wedding and says that there's not going to be a wedding, and Wolverine's like, "What? Why?" And she says, "Because you're not worthy," and then walks away, and everyone's just like, what just happened? And Wolverine's left walking away with tears in his eyes. And then we see the familiar visage of Mastermind, the X-Men's foe who masquerades as Jason Wingard, and had a hand in the Dark Phoenix saga. And of course, his involvement, with this ongoing X-Men story is further explored in Essential X-Men Volume 4. But yeah, there's some mental manipulation going on in terms of, Mariko's actions there. And we find out, in the X-Men series that this was a part of a revenge scheme by Mastermind to, screw things up for, the X-Men's, personal lives and, get revenge on them and what have you. But that's a story that's covered in Essential X-Men Volume 4. But for the purposes of this volume, that's where things end, though. So, okay, I gotta say, this was an excellent collection. I really enjoyed, seeing the development of Wolverine as a character, because, he goes from, the, confident, I'm the best there is at what I do, but what I do isn't very nice, guy, right? And then, like, when we see him in his element at the beginning, like when he's hunting down that rogue grizzly bear, and what have you, and then we see him in Japan, though, that's where we see him, basically being a stranger in a strange land, wherein, concepts like honor are held above all. And, he tries to, live up to that, but he finds himself unable to, and at least, for a good portion of the story, because of his own inner turmoil, and the fact that, he's up against villains who tout honor, but don't value it themselves. And so you see this character get to a point where, he's able to, live up to that notion of honor by fighting not as an animal, but as a man. And so, it's really cool to see Wolverine's journey in that regard. And I liked, the characters that we had on hand. I mean, Shingen was a fantastic villain. I mean, sort of like an old school Japanese gangster, who's also an expert sword fighter. And so, I mean, seeing this old guy, go at it with Wolverine twice and, win one time and nearly win the other, I mean, that's when you know this guy's dangerous. I mean, he's not a mutant, he's just that good at combat. And it was interesting seeing, this type of opponent going up against Wolverine and giving him that hard of a time, which reminds you that, yeah, Wolverine's got an adamantium-like skeleton and claws, but at the end of the day, though, I mean, he's still human, more or less. I mean, he's a mutant, but he's human, so, if he gets hit in certain areas of his body, I mean, he's going to get hurt, plus the fact they had all that poison running in his system the first time around didn't help either. So, but yeah, I mean, Shingen was a great villain, though. And I liked how there was a hypocrisy with his character in the sense that, he touted family honor and used quote unquote family honor to basically pimp out his daughter to, the member of another crime family who's a complete animal, who's a very abusive person. And so, we have Shingen touting honor and yet not practicing it. Basically he's using terms like honor and culture, in order to make his goals sound more noble, I guess. But through his actions, though, we see that he has no honor, or he, at the very least, he has very little real honor left, if he had any honor at all originally. And Mariko gets a bit more exploration, in this miniseries as well, because we saw her in a couple of the stories in the X-Men series, and very likable woman, very lovely, very easy on the eyes, and it was a very cute pairing. I mean, you got the sort of rough around the edges, Gaijin, Wolverine, and then you have the refined, beautiful, shy Mariko, and they were a cute couple. And you see her further explored in this series, and you see that she's a lot stronger than she lets on, but it's just that she's in a position where honor is everything, and she kind of has to go by the family rules according to her culture. But I like that at the end, once Wolverine defeats Shingen, she's able to take back her power, take back her life, because Shingen, having been defeated, is basically revealed to all to be a fraud, or at least, someone who, has no honor. Whereas Wolverine, this former savage, has more honor than the guy that was supposed to have had honor, which I, thought was rather, fascinating. It's always ironic when you got stuff like that. But I liked that Mariko was, in a position where she could reclaim, not only the family's honor, but her independence, and, she could be free to be with Wolverine. And of course, Mastermind had to come and ruin that. But I mean, for the miniseries, though, I mean, it was a really good bit of character development for Mariko. And Yukio, I loved her character. Very entertaining, to read, on page and see her in action and everything. And even though she's just, all about the adrenaline rush and, embracing the chaos and everything, there's a zest for life with her character that you can't help but admire. And it's kind of catching, if you will, for multiple characters, Wolverine and Storm especially. But yeah, and it was fascinating seeing her being a pawn of Shingen, and yet at the same time, falling, for her mark, for Wolverine, right? And, I liked that, as, I'm not going to say she's crazy, but as reckless as she is, she's genuinely trying, to prove herself to Wolverine. She's trying to prove to him that, hey, forget about Mariko, I'm the woman for you. And I like that, the two of them genuinely do have a bond with one another, and something that even went into romantic territory. But, I mean, at the end of the day, Mariko is the woman that Wolverine loves, but at the same time, he does feel something for Yukio. And I liked that, he couldn't bring himself to kill her, but at the same time, he couldn't just bring her to justice either, because of, the stuff they've been through together. And so when he let her go, that was the best he could do in his mind. And so the two of them, they crossed paths again in this series. But, I really liked her character, though. And also her friendship with Storm was actually pretty cool, too. And Storm was going through kind of a personal, crisis of her own, like kind of an identity crisis almost, trying to figure out who she was. And when she crosses paths with Yukio in the story, I mean, the two of them hit it off rather well and, become, best friends in a way. And so that was pretty cool to see. And Storm's a character who, tends to get a lot of love whenever Chris Claremont's handling her. And, the stories on hand here, definitely show that. And, because I read the stories that took place before, the issues collected here in Essential X-Men Volume 4, it was cool to kind of revisit that, even though that, like, and even if, say, you're a reader who's, reading this with a fresh set of eyes and, not having read any of the other X-Men stuff, I mean, you could definitely see that there's a lot of development, with Storm going on. And, Yukio's involvement definitely brought a lot of that out. The artwork is, good on, both counts. Frank Miller and Josef Rubinstein, do a fantastic job on the miniseries. Very cinematically graceful in terms of, say, fight choreography and everything, and the landscapes. I mean, it really does look like, they did research as far as, drawing what things look like in Japan and what have you. And of course, Paul Smith and Bob Wiacek, when they did the artwork on the X-Men issues, I mean, it was pretty consistent with, the art style of the majority of the stories at that point in time. And so, not too jarring of a difference between the two. And I liked how you have kind of like a direct sequel, in the X-Men stories that's a sequel to the miniseries. And I liked seeing like the family dynamic, between Silver Samurai and Mariko being explored. And Viper is always a good villain. At least at the point in time that she was used in these stories, she was a good villain. And it was interesting seeing her dynamic with Silver Samurai, because the two of them, they work together in crime, but apparently there's a bit of a, you get the idea that there's like a romantic thing going on there, which is why, Viper, was, willing to, negotiate with Wolverine, was to get Silver Samurai to safety. And so it was interesting seeing that, because she's very ruthless, and she still is ruthless, but at the same time, the fact that, there was someone that she cared about, I thought was interesting. So it's like you got this, you got Wolverine and Mariko and Yukio, and then you have Viper and Silver Samurai. So there's like, love triangles all around, right? But yeah, the fight scenes, all around were very well done. I think, with respect to, Paul Smith, I think the majority of, the acclaim is probably going to be going to Frank Miller here, because when it comes to, say, the fight scenes, with, Wolverine, whether it's Wolverine fighting Shingen or Wolverine and Yukio going through an army of hand ninja, I mean, it's very cinematic, very graceful, and I especially liked the chase scene of Wolverine going after Yukio across the rooftops of urban Japan, and they're eventually crashing into the sand guards and what have you. I mean, if they put that to screen, that would definitely be something that would be cool to see. And a lot of the story serves as a basis for the plot of 2013's The Wolverine. If you see that movie and then you read the stories here, or vice versa, you could definitely see where the movie got a lot of its stuff from. So it's interesting, how some of the stuff a lot of the stuff they changed, to basically make it more, I guess, uh, balanced for, cinematic purposes and to make things make more sense, for the X-Men film series at the time. But also, it's cool to see, like, okay, which parts did they get from the Wolverine miniseries, and which parts did they get from, the X-Men issues and what have you. So, it's cool seeing where the Wolverine, got its stuff from the Wolverine miniseries. But all in all, also I was just gonna say, the fight scene, the final fight scene between Wolverine and Shingen, it's gone down in a lot of circles as one of the best, comic book fights put to page, and it's definitely one of Frank Miller's proudest moments as an artist, I think, because much like his Daredevil work, it's very cinematic, very graceful. The choreography flows from panel to panel, and the fact that there's like a personal stake, in this fight makes things that much more intense. And so, definitely a highlight for Frank Miller and Chris Claremont. His writing is on point. Like if you've been reading the X-Men stories up to this point, and then you're reading the Wolverine miniseries, I mean, the characterization just flows from the X-Men book to the Wolverine miniseries, but also you see Wolverine growing as a character, and so by the time the X-Men reunite with him, he's still the lovable berserker that we all know, but at the same time, he's at a better sense of he has a greater sense of personal peace and enlightenment, for lack of a better term. But unfortunately, with Mastermind screwing things up at the end, that kind of puts a kibosh on the wedding and everything. But it's nice to think that had things gone differently, Wolverine and Mariko would have been happily ever after. But all in all, I'm going to give Wolverine 5 out of 5 stars. This was an excellent collection and an excellent story too, and it was fun to reread it for purposes of this review. And having read the X-Men stories that take place prior to this, it's really cool to see how this fits in within those stories. And so I really wish Essential X-Men Volume 4 had included this in the book, because it just would have made things that much better as far as flow goes. But yeah, on its own though, I mean, this was a great story. So 5 out of 5 stars. So thanks for taking the time to check out my review. You got any questions, comments, drop a line, let me know. And if you like what you see here, feel free to subscribe. So y'all have a good night. Take care. Bye.